Our first question. Across the country and in Virginia, the pandemic exposed even deeper cracks in mental health and behavioral health services. From reports of growing behavioral challenges in our classrooms to exponentially increases in mental health related calls for local police, referred to as TDOs, temporary detention orders, mental health related issues are impacting Lynchburg and communities across the nation. If elected to City Council, how would you leverage local government resources and build support between our public health community, mental health professionals, law enforcement, faith communities, and various other local organizations, businesses, to collectively address mental health challenges in Lynchburg and our region? This one is directed to you, Mr. Misjuns, first.
Thank you, Mark. So first, the thing I want to bring attention to is we've recently got some funding from our delegates and our senators for a regional crisis receiving center here in Lynchburg. That's going to not only impact our city, but it's also going to impact the surrounding counties, and that's going to be a huge benefit for us when we get there. So I want to thank the Republicans that led the way to get this done for our city, because we need that. Second, I've been involved in these processes many times. I'm a former Lynchburg fire captain, I'm still a paramedic, and I know how these TDO and ECO processes work, and they are taxing on the entire system. So the answer that we have is what the state is providing us, the funding that's coming for this regional crisis center. That is the next best step that we can take, and we're headed in that direction, and I look forward to the outcome of that.
Mr. Wright.
Thank you. Well, and thank you very much to the Alliance for having us this evening, and thank you, Mr. Misjuns, for your service with the fire department and as an EMT. So I think the role that City Council plays is a really important one. We have the opportunity to be a convener across the community, so we can bring together partners like Centra and Horizon, the Sheriff's Office, the Police Department. But a lot of this does live, and I say this with affection and respect, with the state. We don't have enough beds in our state mental health system. We just don't have enough. And so I'm excited to partner with our state delegation here from Lynchburg. And right now, of course, we have Senator Newman, Senator Peake, and Delegate Walker to work with them and legislators across the state to actually increase both the number of beds we have in our mental health system, but also funding from the state for additional police officers for each locality, because again, a lot of our funding is limited. We get a lot of mandates from the state, but not the funding to do it. So we need, frankly, more funding from the state.
Mr. Earl.
I think we got to give credit where credit is due. Is that on? Can you hear me?
I think so.
I'll just have to project. Yeah, I think we've got to give credit where credit is due. This crisis center is going to be a boon to this problem. I also think that across the city, there's a lot of people in this community that are being asked to do the jobs they are not trained for. Police officers, teachers, they are asked to deal with emotional distress that they are not prepared for. There are only 6 social workers in the LCS system, okay? So what we have to deal with here is let's address this problem from when it starts, okay? And that is in our youth. And like what Dr. Twitty was saying before, there are 62 economically disadvantaged, 62% of economically disadvantaged youth in our LCS system, okay? That will only lead to this sort of mental distress. So what we need to do is we need to boost the services that are provided to our youth, and over time, that will work its way up.
Yes.
Yes, I do just want to add that City Council worked with the Police Department to inaugurate a new pilot program of actually having clinicians going out with police officers in the city. And I would like to see that program expand. Right now, again, we're getting funding through, I think it's a federal grant, it could be a state grant. But to have more, folks who are responding who are actually, professionally trained to deal with the, the crisis event perhaps that they are actually stepping into, right? As Mr. Earl said, a lot of folks are responding to mental health challenges without having the training to do it. And they shouldn't have to be put in that position. The community should step up in a way to make sure that actually folks are getting the care that they need. I would also just point out, I agree, the Lynchburg City Schools, they need more counselors and they need more wraparound services. They used to have more social workers in the schools. They have fewer now. and that is a critical population that we're missing.
Quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. There's also an aspect of this problem I think it needs to be addressed as well. Our human resources here are also understaffed, and they have to do things that what our officers have to do. But they have to do it on the child side. So when a parent is in emotional distress and they go away, or the child is taken away, they're the ones that have to stay with them for 72 hours or above, okay? And they're not going anywhere. There is no one to relieve them. So we also need to look into that system as well.
Mr. Misjuns, did you want to add anything?
I don't have anything to follow up on that.
All right. Education and workforce development. With aging buildings and shrinking student population, Lynchburg City public schools are facing a critical choice about consolidation and new school construction. Several choices have been presented to City Council, the school board, and LCS administration. Mr. Earl, should LCS build 2 new schools and consolidate, continue with the existing buildings and renovate, or some combination of new school construction and renovation?
Thanks, Mark. This is an issue that initially got me into this race. The school's facilities report, and I said this in the stump speech, that is an onion that once you peel back has lots of complicated and controversial layers. So my take on this is that I would love to build all of these new schools, right? And I want to be as economical and save as much money as possible in our school systems, but here is the thing. If you shut down a school in a certain neighborhood, what does that do? I need to ask the question too, what are we gonna do to our historically underrepresented neighborhoods when we take one more thing away from them? Okay, so we have to also keep that in mind when we're making this decision.
Mr. Misjuns.
So there's a lot of challenges with the school system right now, including that facilities report. I'd also like to highlight that I spoke with a voter not too long ago who told me his child was stuck on the bus for 2 hours going to school in the morning, right? So there are a multitude of challenges in the school system. My wife is a public school teacher in Lynchburg, and I hear about it all the time. The issue that we're having right now is that the schools just simply aren't listening to parents or teachers. The problems are being given to the school board, the challenges are being given to the school board, and we get nothing back. We don't get what we ask for, right? Just today, we had a massive lockdown at EC Glass High School. But last week, we had the vice chair of the school board arguing against more school resource officers to protect our children. That is a challenge, okay? So we need to keep our kids safe. The school system needs to listen to parents, and we also need to focus on academics, and that's where we need to go first. Then we need to look at what is the return on investment on those dollars we're going to spend on these facilities, and where do they need to be located.
Mr. Misjuns, thank you. Mr. Wright.
Yeah, I actually don't disagree with that, with Mr. Mission's point about we need to make sure that anything we do is fiscally prudent, that it actually makes sense and we can actually afford it. I mean, that is one of the big challenges. When we built Heritage High School, that was about a $100 million project, and that's real money, right? And it has downstream consequences. So whatever we do, we just need to make sure that we're being thoughtful about it. So I'm an LCS graduate. I went to EC Glass. Go Hilltoppers. Also go Pioneers. We love Heritage too. But I went to some of the most inefficient schools that we have in our system. I went to Dunbar. I went to R.S. Payne. I went to Lincoln. And these are schools that I had wonderful teachers in those schools, but the facilities themselves, and while really well maintained, they are inefficient. I mean, they were built in the 1920s to the 1960s. They are not designed for the 21st century. But I think most importantly, the outcome of this facility study is we need to be collaborative. And this is not just a collaboration between the schools, which operates the buildings, and the city, which owns the buildings. It's a collaboration with families and citizens, the folks who are actually paying for and using these facilities.
Recent reports have shown that standardized test scores fell significantly in every locality in Virginia during the pandemic. But according to Public School Review, the National Center for Education, and the Virginia Department of Education, Lynchburg City schools have consistently lagged Virginia's statewide public school average, as well as surrounding localities in math and reading proficiency. Mr. Wright, what steps would you propose in improving the numbers?
Yeah, I mean, we should be honest about it. We're not where we want to be. Achievement in LCS is not what we would like it to be. And this is not because, in my view, because we don't have really talented educators and administrators and families who care a great deal about the outcome for their students. I think largely what we're talking about here are very deep and very complicated challenges that face us as a community. How do we build wealth in certain communities? I mean, think about it, right? We have affordable housing in our community, as was mentioned by Ms. Reed, and I'm really glad she brings it up because we are short several thousand units of affordable housing in this community. Right? We talk about James Crossing, but those are folks actually who have a roof over their heads, but there are thousands of people who don't. And that includes a lot of children. So for example, let's say you have a child who's, they show up to school hungry, or maybe they've been couch surfing between homes, right? So there are some really serious and I think very real systemic challenges that we also have to address beyond, and this is a big conversation and I wish I had more than a minute, and I'm giving the stop sign, but I think this is a really big challenge, but we also need to focus on some of these really important community wealth building aspects to make sure that our neighborhoods are actually secure and safe and supportive for students before they even get to school.
Mr. Earl.
Yeah, before I get the SOL scores, I'd like to, I'm not correcting the councilman here, but the new term is the opportunity gap. It's not the achievement gap. It attacks the root of the problem. Some kids have more opportunity than others do. If you look at the SOL scores, look at all the demographics, I'm not going to spout them out at you. It is the ones that are economically disadvantaged that are bringing down their scores. And like Bo just said, if you're hungry, you can't learn. If you're in emotional distress, you can't learn. If you don't have a home, you can't learn. So we as a community need to make a decision about where we're going to put our resources to get those scores up. Also, I'll say one thing about standardized tests. As a straight A student who never did well on standardized tests, I don't find it as a fair test of either learning ability or teaching ability. Ask any teacher, they do not want to teach to a test, okay? Because once the scores go up, tests change.
Mr.
So
Misjuns.
if you go back about 10 academic years and you look at this even larger, you'll see that the scores have dropped anywhere from 27 to 46% across the board in that time frame. So while we've had Democrat leadership, and both of these gentlemen beside me are endorsed by the Lynchburg Democrat Party, while we've had Democrat leadership in Lynchburg, we've seen a drastic decline in those scores. So the answer is simple. We need new leadership, and we need an elected school board, because the school board needs to be able to be held accountable by the voters. If the school board can be held accountable by the voters, if it's not working for them, then the parents and families can come out and recall them. It's that simple. Right now, the only solution they have is to complain to the school board, and it falls on deaf ears. And then when they go to city council's not going to hold them accountable. My friend here, Mr. Wright, received a $1,000 contribution from one of the school board members, and Ms. Tweedy, our other incumbent, she received a $1,000 contribution from the school board vice chair's wife. So how do we expect them to hold them accountable? It's time for new leadership.
Go ahead.
Well, I'll just point out that Ms. Reed also received a $1,000 contribution from a school board member.
Hold up, please.
You know, I want to be really careful here not to make this about personal antagonisms, but we should talk about the policy. And I think the policy is our schools need our help, right? I mean, oftentimes and I think it's really important actually, I think it's a school board member actually said this, I'm going to quote him, I'm not going to steal it, but he's like, when you have, let's say you've got a corporate board, and half the corporate board is talking about how terrible the product is, you're probably not going to want to buy that product, which is not to say that we can't be good partners and ask tough questions of the schools. We should. That's what true partnership to me is. But it also means that, so we should hold them accountable, but we should also ask, how can we help? Our schools deserve it.
Mr. Earl?
I'll just like to say one thing about elected school boards, and this is a bipartisan issue. It's not right, it's not left. You have to look at the municipality. Right now, we're talking about resources and what is best for this city. There is, I don't know the number now, $70,000, $80,000 being invested across all of our, across all of the candidates. That is a lot of money. Okay, if we move to an elected school board, who's going to get elected? The people with the money. And when that happens, what you lose is diversity. Yes. And various beliefs and thoughts, because you want a diverse, not just in race or ethnicity, you want diverse thoughts spanning your school board. And we will not get that if we spend a ton of money trying to get these school board members elected.
Can I follow up on that?
Go ahead.
I would like to argue against the diversity point because the Republican ticket with myself, Ms. Reed, and Larry Taylor is far more diverse than any Democrat ticket or independent ticket that's been offered in the city of Lynchburg. And second, the school board's got to be held accountable. Nobody's willing to do it. They have been failing our students and our families for a long time. It's not about what's best for the city. It's about what's best for our children and their families. And that's what we need to focus on.
All right, so we asked this before, are laboratory schools the answer? Could that be part of the solution? And we'll start with you, Mr. Earl.
Great. I always think we need to look for new and innovative ways to teach our children, but I'm also going to ask, where's the money coming from? Because all I am hearing is, we don't spend enough money. We need more stuff. We don't spend enough, or we spend too much money. We need more things. So I guess my question is, if we want to start new and innovative schools, where are we going to get the money in a system that we are constantly looking for more, okay? Just like Dr. Tweedy says, we have schools of innovation, let's invest in them. We also have nonprofits all around town. Take the Jubilee Center, right? Every summer they have a STEM class where they teach underprivileged kids how to do science, right? And they also give them a place to go and have some recreation and physical education, right? There are ways in our community to make the same thing happen. We just need to find them and invest in those.
Mr. Misjuns?
So one thing I want to point out about the lab schools is both Mr. Wright and Dr. Tweedy, they both voted against them this year. So we can know what the answer is for the Democrats. They're not going to support them. We're for opportunity on the Republican side of the ticket. We're not for one solution. We're not for a one solution, one size fits all public school system. We're looking for the opportunities that will fit the different children out here in our community, right? And if there's opportunities available right now, the Youngkin administration has said they want to do lab schools, they want to do charter schools. We should be lobbying Richmond to try to get those opportunities in our city, because if we get greater resources for our kids and greater options for them to learn and different ways for them to learn, we're going to have better outcomes across the board. Education is not one size fits all. We need to make sure we meet the children and the families where they're at with their needs and provide them with the best opportunity to get ahead in life.
Mr. Wright?
I agree. And honestly, I'll say, I am skeptical when politicians talk about education, because they usually have an angle. And so when I first heard about laboratory schools, it sure sounded like a typical political tactic to defund public education. And so I was pretty skeptical of it. Now, the more I've learned about laboratory schools, I think the more I'm willing to, I think it's actually something we should consider. Partnering with especially with like local colleges and universities, to perhaps have a partnership with those. So look, as Ms. Reed says, I'm all for innovation in education, absolutely. So should we consider laboratory schools? Yes. Should it come at the expense of a quality public education for everybody else? No. Right? So I think is provided we're able to do that, and while also, and I agree with Mr. Earl, while also supporting our middle school, our schools for innovation, Darrington and Dunbar, oh gosh, there's one more, which will come to me in a second. And then our governor's school, right, which we have here, which does an immense amount of really cool, innovative things. So I'm for it, I'm interested.
Public safety. Last December, it was announced that the starting pay for Lynchburg City police officers would be increased to $50,000 per year to address the 28 hard vacancy positions in the department at that time. By January of this year, that number had dropped to 25 hard vacancies, and as of August, it stood at 22. Mr. Misjuns, what other ways are there to attract applicants and then retain them?
So this has been an ongoing problem for many, many years, as Ms. Reed stated earlier. Public safety and defending our homeland has been my career for the last 22 years. I'm ready to solve these challenges. And I've seen the landscape change in that time frame. In the 15 years that I worked for the Lynchburg Fire Department, citizens aren't safe, not like they used to be. And first, we need city leadership that's willing to condemn violence and destruction, even when the perpetrators of that might be political allies. But that's not something that we have going on right now. We need to focus on making sure it's a long-term solution, not a election year solution. We got a great investment in public safety pay, absolutely, right before an election year. I can tell you, because I was leading the charge, fighting for increased pay and fixing compression with the Lynchburg Fire Department for the better part of 5 years. And nothing happened. All of a sudden, we get an election year, and city council Democrats are providing us that solution. There's too many people that have left already.
Mr. Wright.
Yeah, I'm not going to give you a partisan answer this evening. I think it's actually important to talk about real facts here. So this city council, as Dr. Tweedy said earlier, not only do we have the highest starting pay in the region plus a sign-on bonus, we have actually, at the Police Benevolent Association's urging, and they are right to do so, we've actually instituted a new pay scale system that was requested so that officers, so the compression issue is resolved, which is why I think I'm honored to have received the Police Benevolent Association's endorsement, because they recognize that what this city council is doing is right. We're actually getting it right, and not just by our law enforcement officers, but by our professionals in the emergency services department. We're also, as Dr. Tweedy pointed out, we are investing in a new police department headquarters, and that is not election year. That's been going on for 5 years now, 4 or 5 years. We've been working on that, and we are about to break ground on Oddfellows Road. We directed over $16 million of a recent federal grant to the police department headquarters because we want to make sure that when officers show up, the first thing they're not seeing is a dilapidated, decommissioned church that's serving as our current police department headquarters.
Mr. Earl.
Yeah, I have a couple answers to this. Some people would, lead us to believe that we do not like the police. Okay, they keep our city safe. They should feel safe. They should be well funded. They should be well paid. They should have great places to work because they need that. But these things take time. Okay, this can has been kicked down the road a long time. Enough said about that. But when we're finding a solution and taking the right steps to get there, it's not going to happen in one day. Look at the crime statistics. Yes, there's this picture being painted that we are at war in our community, okay? If you look at murders, homicides, they are up, and I would love to see an investigation in that. But if you look at the violent crime rate, it has been almost stagnant since 2010, okay? You could draw a line. And if you take into account that we are 10,000 people stronger, that rate plummets, okay? So what I want to see in this community is optimism, okay? Collaboration, that we are on the right track, we are taking the right steps. We just need to be patient because these things take time.
One final question.
I got to follow up on that.
Go ahead.
One, Mr. Earl mentioned that the can was being kicked down the road. Well, it has been by Democrats, okay? And two, there's been no new police positions added in the last 2 years. Again, Democrats. What was a priority more, roundabouts or police officers? And three, the third point I want to add to that is City Council didn't vote on the increased starting pay for police officers. Winter Benda, our new city manager, did that on his own at his own authority. So that was not a vote by City Council to make that happen. Our city manager did that on his own.
Somebody wanted to
You first?
just
After
go
you-
ahead.
All right, absolutely. I'm running as an independent. I could have walked into the LDC and say, I want to be your candidate, but I want to make a statement. Okay? I could have the backing of the whole Democratic Party, but I wanted to make a statement because partisan politics and national politics do not belong at the local level. Okay?
Let's hold up. Go ahead. Okay.
Oh, I'm good.
All right.
Oh,
Mr. Wright?
okay. I want to take up the point about, the city council hasn't funded more police positions. Well, as the gentleman just said, we have 20-some hard vacancies. What that means is we can't fill them. So what instead is being asked is that we should set aside more money for positions that we can't fill, which then means we're not funding other city services. So that's a misleading, I think, That's a misleading suggestion because in fact, actually we are funding positions. We just can't fill them because we can't recruit them. And that's not a Lynchburg problem, that's a national problem.
I have to move on. I have to move on. That's okay. Economic development and infrastructure. One of the biggest impacts of the pandemic outside of the impact to public health were supply shortages, especially in real estate. New and existing home prices skyrocketed. Many localities across Virginia, including several of our neighboring localities, cut their real estate taxes to blunt the effects of rising real estate assessments. Lynchburg did not, despite running a budget surplus. So, the question to you, Mr. Earl, should the city of Lynchburg have cut real estate taxes and fees with inflation soaring?
25% of our land in Lynchburg is untaxable due to either it being an educational institution, a church, or city land. That is one of our biggest sources of income. And all I'm hearing is we need more of this, we need more of that, we need more of this, we need more of that. Where is it going to come from? Now, I would offer that there are some taxes that can be looked at, like our meals tax, okay? In June, it was the 11th month of the fiscal year, they had already earned over $3.5 million more than they had budgeted, okay? That's a tax we should look at. It is immediate. It gives relief to the folks that are catching a meal in between jobs. It is the working parents that don't have time to cook, so they're going out and grabbing meals for their kids in between soccer practice and homework. Immediate relief. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Mr. Wright.
Thank you. Yes, so, I mean, I kind of want to correct the question because, as Dr. Tweedy mentioned, we actually did provide tax relief in this last fiscal year. We provided both real estate property tax relief in the form of a rebate, and we also provided personal property tax relief on vehicles that if you own a vehicle in the city, you receive personal property tax relief. If you own multiple vehicles, you receive multiple forms of personal property tax relief. So it's just that's not an entirely accurate question. I will say, though, that this city council has really supported businesses in our community through thoughtful, strategic investments in infrastructure, including our roads and bridges, including the Lakeside Dam Removal Project, downtown renewal, which is still ongoing, unfortunately, but a lot of it has actually gotten done. And over the past 20 years, City Council has invested in neighborhoods across the city, and I'll just cite downtown, for example. Downtown land value went from $75 million to over $250 million today. That's pro-business. That's pro-Lynchburg's economy. And so those are the kind of investments that I think we need to continue making here.
Mr. Misjuns.
Whose taxes went up? Mine did. Taxes are way too high. Mr. Right beside me voted 7 times against lowering your taxes, okay? 7 times. So, yes, we got to vote for reduced taxes one time, 1 year, okay? But that one time, 1 year, leading into an election year again. Just want to point that out, all right? Taxes are too high. The region, we were the only locality that didn't provide some sort of tax relief coming into this pandemic, right? And now we're seeing the results of that. In 3 years, we've lost about 3,000 jobs in this city. We're not headed in the right direction. And not providing long-lasting permanent relief to our citizens is a problem. When we have $27 million above what our surplus was supposed to be in the unassigned fund balance, why wasn't any of that given back? And I also want to point out in this budget, Mr. Feraldi sitting right over there, Councilman Feraldi, he's the one that actually brought the motion forward to provide tax relief to all of you.
Well, I see people looking my way, yes.
Well, I'll point out a couple of things that folks always say to cut taxes. And I'm not saying that there are definitely going to be opportunities like this last fiscal year when strategic tax relief really makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense for our citizens, it makes a lot of sense for our economy, for our community. But I never hear the other side of the coin being asked, what are you willing to cut? Because there's always a cost to it. There's always a cost. And what are you willing to trim? And I never hear a compelling answer. Nobody ever says, I'm willing to cut public education. or I'm willing to cut our police positions, or I'm willing to cut our clean water. But those are the choices that city council has to make. So if you're going to say cut taxes, okay, what are we then going to cut in response? Because it actually does matter, despite what some folks have said, including this evening, it does matter where that money comes from, right? So if we get a surplus, and a lot of it was federal money, and unexpected sales tax revenue, but that's one-time money. We can't count on that in future years. So if we're going to cut a long-standing service, then we need to say, well, what is it going to be? Because it does matter where the money comes from, because that restricts our ability under the law.
Mr. Earl, did you want to add?
Yeah, sure. The only thing I'll say is a lot of that money, or at least some of it, forgive me, some of that money is going into the job vacancies. So do you want those people, the people in our public services, do you want them to hire more people? Because they have to keep slots and they have to keep payments open and the revenue open to be able to pay those people once they are hired. Okay? That's all I'll say.
All right.
I'm going to add to that. I got to add to that.
Very quickly.
Very quickly. So one, the city used to have an Office of Internal Audit, killed by Democrats, okay? And that would be a way that we could look at where this money's going. I've spoken to principals that say they have too much money in their school system, in their local budget at the school level. Too much money, they can't spend it all. I've seen it, I was a city employee. Too much money on certain things that can't be spent. If the city manager has the money and the ability on his own without a council vote to change the starting pay of the police officers to $50,000, we need to take a good hard look at the way we're budgeting, and we need to spend money smarter. We can do that, and we can save citizens money doing that.
Candidates, thank you. And thank you to our wonderful audience. We hope you learned more about the 7 candidates. 6. Well, actually, there are 7, 6 here tonight. As we wrap up, I'd like to thank our event sponsors one last time who have made this event possible. Our presenting partner, Appalachian Power, corporate partner, Liberty University, and our legislative series advocacy program partners, ABC 13, the News in Advance, Appalachian Power, Liberty University. Without their support, this event would not be possible. And to the Lynchburg Regional Business Alliance for hosting this event, thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening as well as you could. I heard some of you clapping. I will deal with you later. So look out. I may put you on the news for reasons you thought were not possible, but I'll figure it out. No, but seriously, thank you for coming. We hope you learned something. And remember, if you'd like to know more about all of these candidates, their profiles are out there on the web. You can go read more. I'm sure some of them will stick around and speak with you as well. All right? Thank you and good night. Thank you. Thank you. You as well. Thank you. You know what?